At that point, at that point, I'd shifted from the White House to working for
Oh, just
Dana's
working
office.
from.
He sends me and another intern down to Nicaragua. You know what? I, um, I guess I find in life that I've endeavored to do really hard things. And with it comes all kinds of friction and challenges to be overcome. And so I guess I found I've developed a really low first gear.
A low first gear.
Meaning, when things get hard, you just find a way to keep moving and keep pushing through, and find a way to win.
Yeah. Where do you think that came from? Is that something you developed as a kid, or it took a lot of these experiences?
I think it. First of all, my dad was very much the embodiment of the American dream. His dad died when he was 13, Great Depression. Um, he had an older sister, a younger brother, and yeah, there was not the welfare state, so they had to survive. So he became a significant breadwinner in the family at age 13, and
13.
he was managing a car dealership when he was 16.
Whoa. They were built different back then.
He found a low gear, and he just ground away and did it. And so put himself through college, commuting back and forth from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan to sell cars on the weekends, hitchhike back to Michigan Tech in the Upper Peninsula. Eventually finished at University of Michigan, did his 2-year Air Force mandatory service, and worked for a tool and die company, basically making machinery, which made die-cast machines. And then 1965, he left with took 6 guys with him, remortgaged his house and his car and his appliances with 3 daughters, and started. So, starting a business in your 20s, if you're not married without kids, you can't fall very far.
Right.
I tip my hat to my dad for having the spine, the steely spine to just say, I'm going to do it now. I'm in my mid-30s, and he had kids, and he did it. So, yeah, I guess. And then growing up in West Michigan, Holland, Michigan, my dad was far and away the biggest employer in town. So knowing that his name was on the back of my jersey wherever I went, kind of, so I just didn't want to disappoint.
Mm. Yeah, because obviously, your dad ended up being really successful, and it's not like you grew up poor or anything like that, but you developed an insane work ethic. There's some sort of inner drive there that, like, I would imagine had to be a combination of your parents being great parents, but also you, like, trying to push yourself, that a lot of people in your position don't get to that point. You know what I mean?
I think we traveled a lot as a family. So in the early 70s, the Russians wanted to buy machinery from my dad. Yeah, because they made great die-cast machinery. And so he goes to Russia in the early 70s. Now, the other thing is my dad had a heart attack in 73, which just about took him out. It was the only time I ever remember coming home with my mom from kindergarten, and my dad was home. And he was in bed.
Whoa.
And he said, I just don't feel well.
Oh, he hadn't had it yet.
Hadn't had it. Took him to the hospital, had the heart attack in the hospital.
Oof.
Thank God. But that put him on his back for a few months, and it really made him, I guess, let go a little bit, delegate, and have other people want to carry, pull the cart for a while. And then they pivoted from making die-cast machines, which is super cyclic. Some years people buy a bunch of machines, some years you don't, and it really sucks when the market goes dry. So they shifted from making machine tools to making die-cast machines. There was a guy that worked for him, Con Marcus, developed it. And when you get in a car and you tip the visor down with a lid, with a mirror, with the lights, that was their patent.
Oh, wow.
And he sold the first 5,000 of those to Cadillac based on one made of balsa wood. Okay, never made a production one. Cadillac bought it, and they had to figure out how to make them at production scale. So say yes and figure it out
That's
was the way. So
That's definitely something you carried with you too.
I think so.
Figure it out later.
I think so.
Had your dad served in the military too, or
He was in the Air Force for 2 years. There was a draft back then. It was right after Korea.
right?
He was a photo reconnaissance officer. So the funny thing about that is whenever you flew in a plane with my dad, he could tell you pretty much what kind of factory was down below
Oh wow.
because of the way it's configured, the smokestacks, the power supply, whatever. I guess he spent a lot of time looking at overhead imagery.
Yeah.
So
Was that something though as a kid, like, because you ended up going into the Navy and there's a whole thing that happened there, but was that something you had kind of dreamed about doing, or?
I got zero military interest from my dad at all. He was, you know what? He did not have the luxury of hobbies or distractions. He had to, feed his family in middle school and high school, and then just ground away because he had no safety net. And so he left me, my siblings, he left us a safety net. So whatever I've done has been easy compared to what he did because he was out on the edge of the cliff and he wasn't roped up.
Yeah. But you did still pick hard things. I mean, it's a hard thing to be like, you know what, I want to be a Navy SEAL. Like, that's not, you don't want to write that off.
Well, yeah, but we travel. So anyway, back to the Russia thing. So he goes to Russia in probably 74, 75, and he really doesn't like it. He doesn't like the surveillance state, and they're going through his stuff, and it just really chapped his ass. Because he had never really been political. He'd never really traveled much abroad, and so that was, Moscow in the winter of 74, 75, very different experience, I'm sure.
Nice and warm.
Yeah. He came back with a big fur hat. But he, the next year, he shipped a Chevy van to Europe, and we did a road trip in the summer of 76 across Eastern Europe and Western Europe. So across Czechoslovakia, then, which was in the Soviet Union, or in the Warsaw Pact, and East Germany. And I remember spending my my 7th birthday in Berlin and seeing the guns and the dogs and the tank traps, and the minefields, everything facing in, keeping people locked into the socialist paradise. And it pressed very deeply at my psyche. Maybe socialism is such a great idea.
Even at 7, though?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you
Very
can
much
see
so.
that it's like a representation what you're seeing of impending violence for sure, right? But the concept of socialism itself driving it, you had an understanding of that?
Sure. A little sign with a skull and the crossbones, Achtung Minen, right? A minefield preventing people from even getting close to the border fence to kill people for trying to escape. That's kind of very indicative of pending violence.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess the way I should ask that is you were able to consciously associate that with that full-blown ideology at the time. Because obviously what you're saying is true. Like, we see this over and over again when communism happens. It's always violent. But, like, it's hard for me to understand.
You can vote your way in and shoot your way out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
The other thing I remember as a 7-year-old was how dark all the buildings were. Everything was covered with like a coal soot. So I remember that in Prague, the only colorful thing you saw was the red star in buildings.
Trying to imagine like what I was doing at 7 if I would have noticed. I don't think I would have noticed stuff like that. But you're there. You're seeing it.
Yeah. So I remember that was a very formative trip, and we did other trips to Europe, to places that definitely opened my eyes to things.
Where in particularly?
The Mediterranean, a bit to Latin America, and then I kept doing travel after that. Even when I was in college, I was a White House intern before Monica Lewinsky made it popular.
Hope you didn't blow the president.
No, sir. And I remember in April of 91, because I'd been working for a guy named Dana Rohrabacher, congressman from California.
I've heard that name.
He was one of Reagan's speechwriters. So very much a freedom fighter. And at that point, Nicaragua, which had been kind of stuck in communism since 79, they'd had a free election. So this woman, Violeta Chamorro, had been elected, but the Sandinistas still controlled all the police. And Dana wanted to have a press conference showing a mass grave of all these farmers that had been killed by the Sandinistas during the revolution. And he wanted somebody to go verify it. So he sent me, 21-year-old intern.
A White House intern.
At that point, I'd shifted from the White House to working for Dana's office. He sends me and another intern down to Nicaragua and meet up with his source. It's the first time I ever had to shake a surveillance tail. And we drove hours out in the countryside, go to this farmer's field, barbed wire fence, and I'd taken an entrenching tool with me. You know, the little foldable shovel? Start digging, and about 3 feet down, sure enough, all kinds of human bones. And the arms, you could see where they'd been tied by cord, and the skulls were shattered. They'd been shot in the head.
How do you feel? I mean, you're a 21-year-old intern. What do you think when you find something like that?
It was really, really sobering. I took Polaroid photos to make sure I had them. Took them back to Dana, and message complete. And that was a week before I got married in 91, April. And also, if you're considering getting married, be away from. All brides tend to lose their mind the week before the wedding. It's a good time to be away.
Yeah.
And it was righteous work.
I've heard that, but it's not like you're away in the Caribbean or something. You're away finding mass graves as a intern. I mean, it
was good.
Yeah. He couldn't find anyone better. I mean, no offense, but like you were an intern. He couldn't find like a special forces guy to go do that. I feel like he had connections, you know?
He had, he'd offered me the job because the full-time staffer, a guy who became a dear friend of mine, Paul Behrens, was a Marine recon, and he'd been activated to do something else. So anyway, send me.
So it was you.
Yeah.
So you find how many bodies approximately did you find?
We stopped digging at 3.
Oh my God.
And there was lots more. So so we covered it up because they were going to do a much bigger, and they found dozens and dozens.
Now, what did you do with that information? You obviously bring it back to them, and then did something happen there where the administration takes action?
They had more hearings, and it was all about trying to help the U.S. Because remember, even then, you had the State Department, which was dominated by leftists that had an aptitude to be apologists for communists.
In 91?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. Lots of the very left-wing churches were very they called them Sandinistas because they were down there. The very long hair NGO hippie types were in love with the socialist lie.
That's interesting. I mean, obviously, like I wasn't around then, but you wouldn't think that considering you got HW in there who's after 8 years of Reagan.
Oh, come on. But you had people in Congress like Ron Dellums, okay, super left-wing Marxist black guy from California who's on the Intelligence Committee, and he is an active apologist for the Soviet Union, for Cuba, for all the communists. So look, we have a wide diversity of political thought in Congress, and it certainly existed back then as well.
Thank you guys for checking out this clip. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe and hit the like button on this video. It is a huge, huge help. And if you'd like to check out this clip's full podcast episode, that link is in the description below or right here. And finally, you can follow me on Instagram and X by using the links in my description below.